Your mind is running a program right now that you did not write. You did not choose the fears that activate before you can think. You did not select the patterns that repeat in your relationships, no matter how clearly you see them coming. You did not decide what makes you feel worthless, or what makes you feel alive, or why certain people pull you in with a force that defies all rational explanation. Something else is running those processes. Something beneath the part of your mind you have access to. Something that has been directing your life from below the surface since before you had words for anything. Carl Jung spent his entire career mapping that territory. Not from a distance, not from the comfortable remove of academic theory. From the inside, he went in himself, into the darkest, strangest, most disorienting layers of his own psyche. He documented what he found there. And what he built from that documentation is the most complete map of the human interior that has ever been drawn. Stay with me, because what you are about to understand about how your mind actually works is going to explain things about your own life that have been confusing you for a very long time. Carl Jung was born in 1875 in Switzerland. His childhood was solitary, strange, rich with interior experience in a way that did not fit the ordinary world around him. His mother was eccentric and emotionally unstable. His father was a pastor, wrestling privately with a faith he was losing. And young Carl learned early what most sensitive people learn early, that the inner world of the people around you is often entirely different from what they present on the surface. He became fascinated by the gap between what people showed and what they were. That fascination eventually led him to medicine, to psychiatry, to a professional life spent in the interior landscapes of the most troubled and most extraordinary minds of his era. And then, in 1907, to Sigmund Freud. The two men met for the first time and talked for 13 hours straight. Freud was already famous, already controversial, the father of psychoanalysis and the most significant psychologist of the age. He saw in the young Jung a potential intellectual heir and treated him accordingly. For years, they were inseparable. They traveled together, analyzed each other's dreams, built a friendship that was one of the most significant intellectual partnerships of the 20th century. And then they broke, over the nature of the unconscious itself, over what lived there and what it meant, over the fundamental question of what the human psyche actually is. Freud believed the unconscious was primarily a repository of repressed personal experience, sexual drives, childhood conflicts, the hidden machinery of individual biography. Jung believed it was something far older and far stranger than that. And that disagreement, pursued honestly, at enormous personal cost, produced a framework for understanding the human mind that nobody before or since has matched for depth. Here is what Jung discovered about the structure of your psyche, and I want you to follow this carefully because each piece connects to something you have experienced without being able to name. He divided the total personality, what he called the psyche, into 3 layers. The first is consciousness, the part of your mind you are aware of right now, the thoughts you can observe. The sense of yourself as a continuous person with a history and a perspective and a face in the mirror. At the center of consciousness is what Jung called the ego. The ego is not the arrogant thing the word usually implies. It is simply the organizing center of your conscious experience, the narrator of your personal story, the part of you that maintains the thread of who you are across time. The ego expresses itself outward through what Jung called the persona, the mask, the social face constructed specifically to navigate the world, to fit, to be acceptable, to meet the requirements of every environment you move through. And here is the first thing Jung understood about the persona that most people never fully reckon with. The persona is not you, it is the performance of you. And most people spend their entire lives inhabiting the performance so thoroughly that they lose contact with what it was performing in front of, the actual self. But the most significant part of Jung's map is not consciousness. It is what lies beneath it. The second layer is the personal unconscious, everything your ego has filtered away. The experiences that were too uncomfortable to integrate, the feelings that were too inconvenient to acknowledge, the parts of yourself that the performance of the persona required you to suppress. Jung called the contents of the personal unconscious the shadow. And here is where his thinking becomes genuinely disturbing in the most useful way. The shadow is not your dark side. It is your rejected self. Every quality you were taught was unacceptable. every impulse that was punished into hiding, every part of who you are that did not fit the version of yourself you learned to perform for the world around you. The anger you sealed, the ambition you learned to apologize for, the vulnerability you armored over, the needs you decided were inappropriate, the specific aliveness you dimmed because it seemed to make other people uncomfortable. All of it is in the shadow, and all of it is still active, still moving, still looking for expression, still running your behavior from below the level of your conscious choices. Jung said this with a precision that should stop you cold. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Every pattern you repeat without wanting to, every relationship that follows the same arc, every self-destructive choice that arrives at the moment something good is consolidating. That is not fate. That is the shadow, running the show from below the surface, calling it something you did not choose. But Jung did not stop at the personal unconscious. This is where his thinking separated from everyone who came before him. He identified a third layer, deeper than the personal, older than the individual. Something that does not belong to you alone, but that you inherited simply by being human. He called it the collective unconscious, the shared psychological inheritance of the entire human species, a reservoir of patterns, symbols, and predispositions formed across the complete history of human experience. Passed down not through culture or teaching, but through the very structure of the psyche itself. Jung found evidence for this everywhere. In the dreams of his patients, people with no connection to ancient mythology, producing symbols and narratives that appeared in cultures across the world, across thousands of years. In the art and literature and religious imagery of civilizations that never encountered each other, finding the same motifs, the same figures, the same deep structural patterns appearing independently in radically different contexts. He concluded that these were not coincidences. They were expressions of what he called archetypes, universal psychological structures embedded in the collective unconscious, ancient patterns of meaning that every human being inherits, that shape how we experience ourselves and each other before any personal experience has had a chance to add its layer. The hero, the journey through genuine difficulty towards something that costs everything and produces transformation. The shadow, the darkness that must be faced rather than defeated. The wise old figure, the wisdom that becomes available after enough has been survived. The anima and animus, the suppressed feminine in the male psyche and the suppressed masculine in the female. The inner counterpart, whose integration is essential to wholeness. These are not literary devices. They are the architecture of the human interior, running in you right now, shaping your responses before your conscious mind has decided anything. And at the center of everything, behind the ego and the persona, beneath the shadow, deeper than the personal unconscious, connected to but distinct from the collective, Jung placed the self with a capital S, the totality of everything you are, not the ego's version of you, not the persona's performance, not the shadow's suppressed material operating without your awareness. The complete integration of all of it, the actual person, the one that exists when nothing is hidden and nothing is performing and nothing is running on old programming that was never updated. And Jung said that moving toward this, the long, difficult, non-linear, completely necessary process of integrating all the fragmented parts of the psyche into a genuine whole is the fundamental task of human existence. He called it individuation, and he was honest about what it requires. It requires going into the shadow rather than running from it, looking at the parts of yourself you were most carefully taught to manage away, not to become them, to acknowledge them, to stop pretending they do not exist, to recognize that the person you actually are includes everything the performance excluded, and to build, slowly, honestly, imperfectly, a life that is organized around what is true rather than what is acceptable. Here is why this matters for you specifically, not as intellectual history, not as interesting ideas about a fascinating figure in the history of psychology. For your actual life, right now, everything Jung mapped is operating in you, the ego maintaining its story about who you are, the persona performing the version that functions in the world, the shadow running the patterns you keep repeating without choosing, the collective unconscious predisposing you toward archetypal experiences you feel without being able to account for, and somewhere underneath all of it, the self, the integrated totality of who you actually are, pressing upward through every moment of genuine aliveness you have ever felt. through every impulse towards something more honest than what you are currently living, through every flash of clarity that arrives when the performance stops and the quiet begins, and something deeper than the ego's management of your identity speaks. Jung said that something is not random. It is the most intelligent thing in your entire interior life. It knows what you are supposed to become. It has always known, and it has been communicating that knowledge through every means available to it. Your dreams, your patterns, your specific hungers, your recurring discomforts, your disproportionate reactions, your unexpected moments of being moved by something you cannot fully account for. All of it is the psyche doing what it was designed to do, moving you toward the specific wholeness that is yours. If you will do the one thing that makes it possible, stop looking away from what you find when you look in. Jung said it better than anyone before or since. Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. Not to be perfect, not to eliminate the shadow, not to transcend the difficulty of being a complicated person, living in a world that prefers legibility over truth, to become conscious, to make the unconscious visible, to stop calling fate the patterns that were never fate, and to start, even slightly, even imperfectly, even with the specific uncertainty that genuine interior work always produces, living from the actual center, rather than the performance of it. That is what Jung spent his entire life making possible. And it is what this map was always pointing toward. Not a better version of the constructed self, the discovered version of the real one. If something in this landed in a way that feels more like recognition than information, that is the self. Recognizing the map of its own territory, that recognition is worth something. Stay with it. Share this with someone who has been living with the sense that the version of themselves the world knows is not the complete one. They need to know that Jung named that gap a century ago and spent his life showing how to close it. And subscribe, because what comes next goes deeper into each specific layer of what Jung discovered and what it means for the life you are actually living.